Hello and welcome to another episode of the Aristi Cybersecurity Podcast. I'm Harj Singh, CEO of Aristi, and I'm joined today by Adam Couch, one of our principal cybersecurity consultants. Hi, Adam.
That's me. Hello.
Adam, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself? Good to meet you too.
Yeah. I'm a principal cybersecurity consultant. I've worked with yourself probably, it's coming up to almost 10 years in April, would you believe it?
Wow.
Yeah. So doing a mixture of penetration tests in the last sort of couple of years, red team assessments. So a bit of everything really.
So that's quite topical at the moment, red teaming, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. So Adam, do you want to start by just defining for us what we mean by red team?
Yeah. So I think probably in its simplest form, without a load of jargon, we're essentially simulating what the bad guys are doing, and in as realistic as possible scenario.
Right.
So we can band all these words around like adversarial simulation,
but
in its simplest form, we are essentially trying to simulate what the bad guys are doing to further strengthen an organisation's security posture. So and all of those elements sort of so if you think about us being if you think about us mimicking that threat actor, so we're trying to be almost as go undetected, so going under the radar, so it's all of those sorts of doing it as close to what you would almost see as an attack, as close as possible. So it's almost us sort of keeping our ear to the ground, sort of doing our homework, trying to follow what the bad guys are doing, and replicating those attacks in as realistic as possible.
So how does that differ from a typical sort of pen test?
Yeah, so we're very much so with a red team assessment, we are still in contact with our points of contact, but with the penetration test, we're very much in the open, and
they know we're coming, don't they?
With that sort of mindset of we're there, they know we're there. So and there is a different mindset from the organisation as well. So they'll for example, like SOCs and like the security team. Are they watching the alerts or are they not necessarily? And it really gives. So and again, when we think about that difference between like a red team assessment and a penetration test, there is that element of are they looking at the logs and seeing. Right. Or are they not necessarily because they know that you're there? So and again, they're not necessarily responding to those logs because they know, well, somebody's there doing a penetration test. Yeah,
so they're ready for us. They tell us when to come in.
Yeah.
They almost, in some cases, let us in, do they? Is there sort of an assumed breach scenario?
Very much so. So we'll still do assumed breach scenarios in a red team assessment, but they'll very much conducted in a different way. So we'll do those within a penetration test as well. But again, they know we're there. They're kind of letting us in.
Okay.
Everybody, it's all. We know we've got a specific scope. So we've got our targets, for example, with a penetration test. And again, that's sort of slightly more.
So just to be clear, pen test is still a very valuable exercise, isn't it? We're not saying
100%,
replace your pen test by a red team because they're very different, aren't they?
Yeah, very much
so. Do you want to talk a little bit about where a pen test fits into a sort of a cyber strategy and where a red team fits in?
When we think about, I guess probably the easiest way to describe it is like that maturity curve, right? So you've got an organisation that might start out their journey doing things like vulnerability assessments, so they're scanning the network and trying to find those low-level vulnerabilities, which is still great. That's really good and super valuable exercise to be doing. Then we might move that on to penetration tests. And as the organisation potentially grows, we might do highly targeted penetration tests. So, for example, if somebody's bringing a new bit of kit online or a new environment, we might end up testing just those specific areas. Or it might be goal-driven, that penetration test within somebody's environment. And then we've got that kind of red team assessment, which goes almost at that top end of the scale,
right?
Where essentially we've done all of those elements. We've done some of that scanning. We've found some of those CVEs, high-level vulnerabilities, and we've patched and fixed those. We've done some of the pen testing bits and pieces where we've chained some of those vulnerabilities together. And then you've got that red team assessment, which is very much more that full scenario, and we're trying to mimic those.
Okay,
those tactics.
In a pen test, you're still doing the manual exploitation.
Yeah.
but it's within a sort of a framework, if you like. So
and it's much more. I think that probably that framework is probably the right way to describe it. We're very much almost on rails. More so with a targeted approach to.
So we're saying definitely do your pen test.
Oh yeah,
because that's your sort of baseline, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So all of those things are still valuable. Doing those vulnerability assessments, doing those doing the security reviews as well.
Yes.
The build reviews, dare I say it, and the server build reviews, because some of that is the crux of the hardening of
nuts and bolts of good security, isn't it?
Absolutely. So still doing some of those, building all of that together. Dare I say it, sort of cliche words for keeping that defense in depth, but it's true, right?
It is,
keeping
absolutely,
defense in depth there.
Yeah.
But then also obviously bringing that red team assessment in.
Okay.
Because we do, as I say, we do find and we see that within organisations, they'll continue to do those different assessments. And we'll do pen tests and we continue to do those authenticated assessments, those build reviews, and you put a red team assessment on it, it just turns it all upside down,
doesn't it? Yeah.
So, it's a very valuable way to demonstrate some of those other vulnerabilities. And give the business that real impact of, blimey, this is what can happen.
So before we go into how we scope a red team exercise, just talk a little bit about when would a business or an organisation be ready for a red team exercise, and when should they sort of stay with their pen testing if it's easy.
Yeah, so I think at the point where we've got some of those key assessments in place already, we've probably been doing it for probably a number of years, and we're really at that point where some of those assessments are starting to look reasonable.
Okay,
we're going through those assessments and probably on a yearly basis, continuing to tick off those and remove and remediate those vulnerabilities. It's really almost time to stretch the legs.
Right. So they're doing all the basics. They're patching. You're not finding any critical issues.
Yeah, I mean,
they're in a good state.
I think we're always going to find some of those things, just because of things like patching, things like that.
Right.
But at the point where we've gone through and we've really exercised those pen tests and those chained exploits together, and some of that sort of low-hanging fruit stuff, then it's time to move on to...
Fairly mature in terms of their cybersecurity strategy. They're doing all the right things, and they now want to know, can we really get hacked? Essentially, that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, we're essentially looking at what the bad guys can do, and trying to simulate those.
So how would we scope a red team exercise? So
there's a couple of ways in which we typically do this. So we look at an organisation in terms of potentially how big they are, what does their kind of footprint look like, and now some organisations will want to give some of that information, some won't necessarily want to divulge as much, but it's if we are able to understand how big that organisation is. So for example, how many users does it have within it, how many computer objects would they typically have within a domain, what does have they got a large external footprint, for example. And we might not necessarily know that at the time, but if somebody's able to give us some of that information, we can better fine-tune.
Could we do it without that information?
We could, and we probably we would do an amount of like the open source intelligence gathering and confirm some
so it depends on where they want us to start, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. But again, very much depending on what their goals are of that assessment. I mentioned earlier about assumed breach. We will still do those within a red team exercise, and that's perfectly valid. Some people might want to test their ability to detect and respond.
Yes.
Some people might want to just go through an assumed breach, or go right from the outside in. And again, it depends whether somebody's got a cloud presence, they might not have a cloud presence.
They might have sensitive data or a particular database that they're really worried about, and that could be your target, couldn't it? You can say
very much so. And again, different sectors, CNI, example, etc.
Okay. So in terms of scoping, then, so the terms of engagement, if you like, so we'd ask the client if they have a specific goal in mind.
Correct. Yep.
If they are mature and they recognise the need for a red team exercise, but they don't really understand what the goal is, would you work with them to sort of...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it might be the first time that somebody's going through that. They might be in a position where they've gone through those different pen tests and they're getting good results from those and they want to move on to that point. So that's fine. We can help them work towards defining that goal. And that might be to, essentially get to set the crown jewels almost, get to that database, or get to a specific piece of data, or get to a system, or reach a network area, or etc.
So the way you conduct an exercise, I'm assuming it's in the same sort of format as an attacker would try and get access to a particular environment or data. So is it easy to then sort of say phase 1 is this, phase 2 is that, or is it?
Yeah, we can. So if we think about that attack chain, so from sort of the reconnaissance phase right through to the attack phase and then so on. So we can essentially break that down into those phases and almost give a sort of a rough timeline as to say, okay, well, we potentially might use this much time on this, then there might be some development time there, and then there might be some phishing essentially there, and then and so on.
Okay, and is it destructive to the environment, or and how does that work? I mean, if a client's saying, well, no, okay,
no, so it wouldn't be destructive,
right?
We can't be in a position where
so you'd get to a point where you've achieved your goal,
yes,
but it's not sort of going to create any damage or downtime.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So that's all part of the scoping. You'd need to recognise some sensitivities. If it's a I don't know, command and control system, or a critical business area that needs to be up all the time.
We tune those goals as well based on that organisation.
Right.
So something like that, as you say, and it might be to almost halt at that point before we go any sort of further forward. There might be those sorts of stipulations.
And how long does a typical red team exercise take?
Oh gosh, so it probably just depends on the type of how we're doing that, and so whether it is assumed breach or whether it's like fall from the outside directly in. But we're probably looking over the course of an 8 to 12 weeks.
Okay, and does the client know this is happening? Do you sort of say we're starting today, like a pen test? You sort of know exactly what's.
We'll have some boundaries there. There's clearly needs to be a clear demarcation between when we've started and when we've finished.
Yes.
In reality, we've got to tell the point of contact. Yes, there is going to be a starting point here,
and
there is going to be an end point here. We're out of your environment.
Yes,
we're finished. With that point.
Okay.
But again, that will typically only be between the need to know people in that organisation.
Okay. So I don't know if you're able to talk about the kind of techniques and tools that you use, or is that dependent on the environment, or?
So it will do really. So we're with what we're up against. But you can imagine there's the whole sort of gamut from going quietly on the inside, using some of those tools, various different command and control tools that we use. There's a whole sort of raft of infrastructure that we've got built within AWS and Azure to accomplish some of those goals.
Okay.
Obviously, phishing from the outside, domain names, a whole raft of stuff there.
Okay. So just talk about some of the benefits then. So a red team exercise compared to just a standard pen test. Just highlight some key benefits for us.
So I think we're testing the organisation's ability to detect and respond to an incident, right? So within that red team system, that's going to be very different to a penetration test where they know we're there and we are trying to get to X, Y, or Z. We're still chaining some of those vulnerabilities, but they're not. I think we mentioned this slightly earlier, but they're not necessarily responding at that point. I think there is definitely a different mindset when we're doing those engagements, those red team engagements, as opposed to a pen test. And that's really where we see an organisation's ability to see those logs and actually respond on it. And that's really the key thing, isn't it? And again, with those organisations that are doing pen tests, they're not in that mindset of I've got to respond. I've seen this thing, and I've got to I've got to act on it. I've got to see if that's an incident.
Well, this makes it real for them, doesn't it? Yeah.
I've got to go down the incident response process, and I've got to do all those things. And they're not doing that necessarily in that penetration test. So when are they then exercising that routine? and they should be doing it in that red team assessment, because those guys wouldn't be aware at that
It's like
time.
a fire drill, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the areas that doesn't get necessarily as much attention, because in a pen test, the guys are coming in to pen test this and this.
Yeah.
So they're not in that mindset of that response.
So you mentioned, Adam, that you're I'll use the word simulating, because it's not really a simulation, because you're actually doing the work, aren't you? You're attempting to gain access to a particular
Yep.
environment or data. But I'll call it simulation for now.
Simulation, emulation.
Emulation's a good word. So we said that you said that you're emulating or simulating a real world attack. Okay. So the hackers have got loads of time, varying levels of capability. How do you keep your skills up to date? How do you know what the hackers are capable of, so you can simulate or emulate a realistic
With difficulty, Harj. It's difficult.
Is it?
It's really difficult.
Right.
There's a lot of work that the guys we have to go through to keep up with different attack vectors. Like I said earlier, keeping our ear to the ground and keeping our skills up to date with those sorts of attacks is very different, and it is a different skill set, to be fair, to some of the penetration tests, the vulnerability assessments, the build reviews, all those sorts of things. There is a different skill set there. There is, going undetected, some of the phishing type scenarios that we go through, bypassing MFA, things like that. Those are different to what you would typically do.
A different mindset,
So
isn't it?
and it's challenging, and it's challenging to keep up. To be perfectly honest with you, with those things, but it's equally rewarding, right? That's why we love doing it.
Yeah, great. So you've wrote a document, a blog, which is on our website,
Yes.
which is a really good overview, if you like, of red teaming, and it also talks about blue teaming.
Yes.
And purple teaming. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that means?
So it's an interesting area. Obviously, we've talked about the red teaming side of things. So we're emulating those our adversaries, and we're very much in isolation from people like the SOC, sort of that instant response sort of side of things. So if we then think about sort of purple teaming in a bit more of a joined up fashion, so we've got the red team and then the blue team, and we're working together at that point. So I do think
what does just talk to us about what the blue team does?
So the blue team. So we're talking about our defenders.
Okay, so that's the
defenders
defending team, right?
In an organisation, the guys that are potentially putting the fixes in place, the guys that are looking at those logs, depending on how big the organisation, depending on whether they've got a separate SOC and whether they've got a separate IT department, they might be classed as one. But essentially, that's what we're talking about there. And obviously, the red team we've discussed. So when we're getting into that purple teaming side of things, it's that kind of clash of colours.
Yes.
And it's us working with those guys.
Yeah.
I do see massive value in doing that. So great, we've done a red team exercise and we've got through and we've done X, Y, and Z. And hopefully that's not the end of the engagement at that point. We've gone through various bits, but I would like to hope that then there's a further engagement. And I genuinely think with a purple team engagement, if we were to carry out those exercises with the blue team and we're in constant communication, then there's going to be a massive benefit to them
seeing how you would defend against
exactly
an attack.
that, and then almost in communication with us. Here's a fix. It's putting X, Y, and Z in place.
Okay.
So
in my head, I've got this paintballing scenario.
Right.
So you've got the red team that's attacking the fort, and the blue team is defending the fort. Does that work? Very. I'm not sure how the purple team would work in that scenario.
Yeah, very much so. I think probably the easiest way to think about it is almost like we're working very much with them, and that constant feedback loop I think is really important. And we're very much more in communication. So we've done X, Y, and Z. Look, here it is. We've done it, and it's at this time, probably a couple of minutes ago or whatever. Can you see it in your logs?
Yeah.
And then can we work together to
Right. So in terms of the strategy, so would you so the pen testing is the sort of bare minimum. When the environment is fairly mature, you would do a red team exercise. Would you then do a blue team after that, or would
purple team? Yeah. So we afterwards, yes, we could do it before.
Right.
So we could break down and it's very much depending on that organisation and what how they want to. But we could do it before. We could break down that attack chain effectively and then re-simulate. But often that might be a better benefit after you've done a red team assessment, because we can essentially say, okay, well, look, this is a thing. We've gone through and exploited this, this, and this, and chained it all together in this. Let's now go back, break that chain down, repeat it, exploit it, execute it, and then see it in the logs, and then run through, okay, well, this is how we would actually do it. We'd respond to it, and look, this is how we can potentially fix it. Can we repeat that again? Can we see it now?
So red team is just the attack.
Correct.
The blue, purple team is defending, but also working with the client to educate them on how to defend against a particular kind of attack, how to review the logs. What if the client's got a third-party provider, a SOC provider, for example? Would you engage with them as well? Or
Absolutely. 100%. It's just a different dynamic. But yeah.
Excellent. Adam, thank you very much. That was a really insightful overview of red team and blue team and purple team.
Cool.
So thank you for your time.
Alrighty.
And thanks for listening. If you want more information on red team or anything we've talked about, you've got your blog on the website.
Yep.
And you can always contact us, and one of our account managers can set up a call, and you're happy to
absolutely, we're always better to have those conversations
It's that kind of engagement, isn't it? It's not.
Totally,
it's not sort of a menu item thing. It is, is it? You have to.
And I haven't got a black hood on, and we'll
have to get you one for the next podcast.
We're approachable. I guess that's the thing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to our cybersecurity podcast. If you're keen to learn more, please visit our website www.aristi.co.uk. Cybersecurity made simple.